Defend with the minimum, attack with the maximum. This is a very easy concept to understand, but apply it and your chess will get an awful lot stronger. Economy is as important as counterplay in defence. The idea is you reserve the minimum forces for defence at your disposal that you need to use, retaining the rest of your army for counterplay. Well, in order to illustrate this theme, let me show you a game from a tournament played in London in 1994. Playing white is Grandmaster Alexander Shabalov, who has since resided in the United States. Playing black, the then international master Jonathan Parker, who has since become the Grandmaster. And the opening is certainly of interest. It's a sharp variation of the Vienna game, where black moves in and sets the tone with knight takes e4. Obviously, if white just takes this knight, then black plays d5, and he's got a very comfortable game immediately. He regains the piece, and all his pieces have plenty of freedom to move in. But white can actually make this game very sharp with queen h5. This is a highly aggressive continuation. It obliges black to sacrifice material, but well, black is allegedly supposed to get a vicious attack for the material sacrificed. As we will see, perhaps it's not quite as simple as that. And well, maybe what Shabalov actually gives us in this game is more or less a refutation of black's idea. But at any rate, the knight retreats to d6, covering f7, and white could regain his pawn here with queen takes e5 if he wanted to, but instead bishop b3 has become established as the best move. And the point of it is that after knight c6, white intends knight b5, and the threat is renewed to f7 by virtue of the idea knight takes d6 check. So black plays g6, white renews his threat to f7 with queen f3, f5, queen comes into d5, and well, normally speaking, this stuff could never work for white. You know, using general principles, you have to say that white is playing almost like a beginner, consistently threatening sort of scholar's mate on f7. He's lurching around the board with his queen. But you see, black's setup is not that natural. The knight on d6 is blocking all the black pieces in. It really is an uncomfortable scenario for black here. White is basing his play on very specific ideas. That is to say, the threat is knight takes d6 check, and then queen f7 mate. So black is obliged to defend f7 with his queen, and at this moment Shabalov moves in and snaps off the rook on a8. So given that black has just allowed this variation gratuitously, what on earth is he trying to do here? Well, okay, black's idea, what is it? Firstly, he's going to regain that knight on a8. At some stage, white is going to have to surrender that knight. So black won't be a rook down, he'll probably be just the exchange down. At that point, the white king will be stuck in the centre. White's queen is exposed on d5, as I've highlighted in yellow, and black can hope to whip up some sort of ferocious counterattack using his queen on the e-file, his knights, and hopefully his bishops too. Well, okay, a lot of games have gone in favour of black from this position simply because the white defensive task is actually quite difficult. But what Shabalov does in this game is make white's defence look effortless. He kicks off with the move h4, which threatens bishop g5. Counterplay, deflecting black's initial idea of moving this knight, hitting the white queen. Black defends himself with h6, and the white knight sells its life dearly on b6. After which, well, at this stage, the white queen really has to get out of the way in view of black's threat of knight d4. So Shabalov moves away, and then after bishop g7, he goes queen h3. And he can get away with this because white has no weaknesses. If the c2 pawn was unprotected, then probably white wouldn't be able to get away with all these queen adventures. But the fact that black has got to actually create weaknesses rather than being able to target existing weaknesses is Parker's problem in this position. So he continues with e4. I mean, that's probably the only move. You know, black has pressure in the centre. He's uncovering this bishop on g7, and well, he's threatening e takes d3 check. So white has got to be accurate, and I think Shabalov answers this challenge with knight e2. That is the most successful move. Alright, black must continue to open things up, or he's not going to have any semblance of compensation here. And this he does with e takes d3 and then rook e8, threatening mate. Well, now it's a question of how white is going to defend himself. If he goes bishop e3, he runs into f4, and white must lose material. If he moves his queen again, he's probably running into knight d4. That, I would say, apart from the mate on e2, is black's primary idea. So Shabalov has to defend with bishop d1. But the bishop's not going to stay on d1 for very long. At least it's going to stay on that square for as long as it deems necessary. White is probably going to castle, and after that he can look for active play. So black must continue to play aggressively, and Parker plays f4. Note that if black had gone knight d4 here, attacking the knight on e2 one more time, white can defend himself with bishop e3. And the threat of bishop takes d4 gives white sufficient time to deflect the black attack. Okay, well, after bishop d1 then, black played f4, white took it off, and black brought his knight into f5. Alright, white has got time thanks to the bishop on d1, and he spends that time castling. He's not worried about that knight, that pawn on h4. That's kind of an irrelevant pawn in many ways. The only thing white wants in this position is to get organised, to get his pieces off the awkward squares that they're on. Black, meanwhile, is very well centralised, beautifully coordinated, but the fact remains he's the exchange down. So if white can just hang on, defend out the next few moves, ride out the storm, then he can go on to win this game on material. And Shabalov again displays admirable defensive flair by playing knight e4. Black is invited to take a pawn on e4. He takes, d takes, but the problem with queen takes e4 now is that the knight on h4 is suddenly unprotected. So black's got to spend a little bit of time protecting that knight first in order to take on e4. But the point is that white has given back material, yes, but he's bought time to organise his position. And this illustrates another very important principle of defence. When material ahead, you should be prepared to return the material in order to get a good position. The most important thing in chess is to get a good position, not greedily grabbing material. So this is why, by sacrificing the pawn at e4, Shabalov has displayed excellent technique, because he's returned material at the right time. He's still the exchange up in this position, and now he's threatening to just remove that knight on h4 and further denude black's attacking army. Okay, rook e6, bishop g4, but by now it's breaking down. Knight h5, bishop c7 check. It really is breaking down now. White is moving in with counterplay for the kill. Bishop takes b6, another excellent move. The problem for black is that if he goes rook takes b6 in this position, rook fe1 is a disaster zone, pinning the queen to the king. So bishop b6, I would say, is the refutation. Black's knights are now under pressure from the white bishops. Parker tries h5. White is happy to take it off. Queen f4, queen a3 check, translating defence into attack. Black goes into a pin. He cannot have been happy to do that. Rook ce1. White is happy to trade. Trading off when material ahead is another typical resource for the defender. Bishop comes into e5, a last threat of mate. g3, queen d2, and now queen a8 was enough for Parker. He's the exchange down. Moreover, white is threatening checkmate on d8. So that was a terrific game by Shabalov, balancing defensive duties with an eye for a counter-attack. Shabalov defended with the minimum all the way through, and then in the end he was able to launch a successful counter-attack with an eye for black's exposed king.